weeks away now from the start of the 2024-2025 Rutgers men's basketball season, the most anticipated season in the modern era, and wanted to do plenty of preview episodes leading up to the start of the season, opening up Wednesday, November 6th at against Wagner at the Rack. They have the exhibition next week on the 17th at the Rack against St. John's, but wanted to take this episode to focus on the center position. There's a lot of questions. It's fair that of anything with this team, I mean, there's a lot of question marks about this team, right? There's a lot of reasons for excitement too. But I think from the 5 position, how they utilize it, the production they get from it, the defense and rebounding they get from that position, a lot of it is going to dictate other decisions that Steve Pikiell makes with the rotation, with certain lineups, matchups, and overall just kind of the makeup of this team. And credit to Brian Fonseca. He had an article that came out today. It's funny. I was thinking about what I wanted to do basketball-wise this week, and I wanted to do a full breakdown of projected minutes. Also, I'm expecting Ken Palm to drop any day now. Evan Maiwa, which I cite his site a lot as well, he announced he's coming out with his projections, team projections tomorrow, meaning Wednesday. So there's a lot of that coming, but the 5 spot has a lot of questions. And Brian Fonseca wrote an article with quotes from Steve Pikiell from Big Ten Media Day last week. You should check it out. But his quote in the headline was talking about not adding a center in the transfer portal because this isn't fantasy sports. And obviously, Pikiell, can be a little on edge at times, or maybe a little prickly in terms of his comments. But I've gone on length about the 5 position in the transfer portal. I mean, the value for the 5 spot in the transfer portal was extremely high, and you saw good centers get top dollar in the transfer portal with NIL. And the reality of Rutgers' situation is that they couldn't go out and do that. They just couldn't. It's not an excuse. It's just reality. And that being said, I think the way the roster was constructed addressed a lot of needs, and the incoming freshman class, you bring in Lathan Sommerville. So I want to talk about the 5 spot, the personnel there, how they could be utilized, areas of emphasis, and just some things to watch for in this episode. But check out Brian Fonseca's article, some great quotes in there from Steve Pikiell from Media Day. But that headline was something else, just in terms of it not being fantasy sports. And I looked at it. I mean, if you think about it, Emmanuel Ogbole, Lathan Sommerville, and Zach Martini, I think they'll all play at the 5 at times, and they all have different skill sets. And it's kind of funny when you think about it from a fantasy sports perspective or transport. I mean, if they were one guy and you took the best of their skill sets, it'd be $1 million portal acquisition, I think, or, top 10, whatever. But you don't have that, and you're going to have to mix and match, and you're going to have to get the most out of the position, utilizing all 3 primarily, I believe. So there's a lot that has to happen. Ogbole, a lot of people are projecting him as the starter. I think initially that will be the case. I think that's the plan. And whether he develops enough to keep that spot remains to be seen. But Pikiell's been very adamant about his development this offseason. He was on my podcast a few months ago, just praising Ogbole for his development. He's a physical specimen. He's bigger than Cliff was. The big question with Ogbole is, can he defend? Can he rebound? Not even at an elite level like Cliff was able to, but at a competent, average to slightly above average level. If he can do that, he will bring value to this team. He will get real minutes. The difference this year with Cliff not being there, and this is not, pile on Cliff by any stretch of the imagination, because obviously it would have been ideal for him to stay. And this team would be, predicted to be top 15 nationally across the board if he did stay. But he required a lot of offensive attention. The offense at times ran through Cliff, right or wrong. And I argued at times it was wrong. It slowed things down. He was relatively efficient, but not super efficient for his position. He shot, anywhere from 51 to 52% from 2-point range the previous 2 seasons. He averaged over 9 shots from the floor per game over those last 2 seasons. But the priority, the focus in getting him the ball on the block, that was a big part of the offense. And last year we saw that, it didn't really lead to more efficiency. Rutgers obviously struggled 2-point shooting as a team. And part of that spacing, right? Part of that shooting in terms of individual talent. But I think the difference now, and we know that Rutgers wants to spread the floor. They have elite playmakers in Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, Jeremiah Williams showed it to be a strength. You have guards, you have talent that can get to the rim, that can create. You have shooters now with Martini and PJ Hayes. They're going to be able to space the floor. And the more you can do that, that plays into the 5 position. But offensively, in terms of a priority, there's only one ball. And you have a lot of guys that are going to want the ball, including Tyson Acuff, who was a top 10 scorer last year. And Rutgers is not going to have to prioritize the 5 position from an offensive perspective. Lathan Sommerville is a lot more ahead in terms of his offensive game. I've seen them practice twice now. Lathan Sommerville was definitely ahead from an offensive perspective, going head-to-head with Ogbole. He's got a natural feel. He's got great footwork. He has a ability to absorb contact, finish through contact. He's got touch around the rim. He's a really exciting player. Now, ultimately, can he stretch the floor? Can he hit jump shots? You don't want him shooting a lot, at least this year. But I have a lot of confidence in Sommerville. I thought he sounded great at Media Day. I think 2 years from now, I think there's a good chance he could be the face of the program as a guy that's going into his 3rd year and is going to elevate his game year after year. I really do. And in terms of this year, my long-winded point is that you're not going to go through the paint. You're not going to, worry about going inside to Ogbole or Sommerville to kind of dictate pace and control the game from the outset, right? You're going to create offense in different ways, and you're going to be different defensively. If those guys can become competent rim defenders, that's a plus. But the way this team is built from a size perspective, from an athletic standpoint, I think the pressure on the perimeter, forcing teams into mistakes, getting them to rush, make mistakes that way, start their offense, ideally late into the shot clock from full court pressure, but also just higher up, farther away from the rim than teams want to start their offense. I think a lot of that's going to be dictated by their wings and guards on the defensive end. But if Ogbole and Sommerville can finish some putbacks on offensive rebounds, and if they can get dunks on dump-offs from all of the guards and ball handlers that Rutgers has that can penetrate, they're going to be efficient offensively. They're not going to need to create shots. Their shots are going to come off of misses and reads from the ball handlers that are going to find them for easy dunks. That's where their value comes offensively. Sommerville has a higher ceiling than that, but I think initially that's what you're looking for from the 5 spot offensively there. And then defensively, if Ogbole, defending without fouling is obviously going to be huge, right? And that adjustment, he hasn't played. He played less than 100 minutes last year. Coming off of that torn ACL, was JUCO the year before. On tape, athletically, he's off the charts. It's just going to be a matter of him advancing on a defensive level and defensive rebounding. If Cliff was elite in one area, it was defensive rebounding. And I think Rutgers was, from the center position last year, was top 25. They were per KenPom in terms of defensive rebounding rate. And Rutgers is going to need to rebound this year. They did not rebound well as a team last year at all. You take Cliff out of it, they were a terrible rebounding team. So they really need Ogbole to be able to rebound, be able to hold his own defensively. Sommerville, when he's in there, is going to have to be able to obviously finish around the rim, but also rebound on the defensive end. He's farther behind, I would think, at this point, just in terms of seeing him from a defensive standpoint. The Big Ten's got some good bigs. It's a fair concern. The 5 spot is a fair concern. Zach Martini is going to play the 5 as well. He played the 5 at Princeton. I mean, people forget how well he bodied Cliff last year. He really frustrated Cliff last year. Arguably outplayed him. He did outplay him. I'll just say he did. And, you know, Danny Breslauer mentioned on his spaces this past weekend. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should. Must follow. Talking about how he matched up against Danny Wolf and outplayed him in the Ivy, who's now at Michigan, 7-footer. So I talked to Zach Martini at Media Day. He embraces playing the 5. He loves it. It's a challenge to him physically, and he's going to embrace it. And I think how minutes get divvied up at the 5 is going to be fascinating to watch. The first 2 weeks, the way the competition is, Pike will getting a feel for the rotation, wanting to get a lot of guys minutes. We're not really going to know how it shakes out until we see Vegas, and then the rest of the non-conference portion, Big Ten play start in December. But you have 40 minutes to go around the 5 spot. Now, Martini has the versatility to play the 4 as well. And I think Ogbole and Sommerville, I think my educated guess is going to be they're going to split about 25 minutes, maybe close to 30. Maybe it's ideal if they could do close to 30 because they would both be holding their own. But I think Martini's going to play a good 10, maybe close to 15 minutes at the 5. And it's really going to dictate matchups, foul trouble, situations. But I could see a scenario at the end of games that you have Martini down at the 5. Again, how they defensive rebound is going to be a huge part of this. And while you can't expect them to be elite rim defenders like Cliff was, they have to be able to hold their own. Now, in terms of offensive flow, pick and roll. Cliff obviously uses a lot of pick and roll. Rutgers uses a lot of pick and rolls. They're going to do that with multiple players this year. But Martini is really good at that. Can Sommerville? That's a big question for me in his development. Can he be effective in the pick and roll? A, setting good screens, springing ball handlers, and how is he on the roll? And can he finish off the roll, moving to the rim? If he can do that, he goes up a notch. Obviously, can Ogbole do that too? One thing I liked about Ogbole that I've seen is I think he's really been working hard on outlet passes. That's one area that respectfully Cliff really struggled at. Getting double, triple teamed. Once the ball got down to him, teams collapsed on him and dropped coverage, and he just was unable to be very effective on it. Now, in his defense, he didn't have a lot of shooters to keep defenders off him. But I know that's something that, Ogbole has been working on, and that's going to be key for him. But the biggest reason for confidence, I think, aside from intriguing skill sets from both of them, along with Martini, is Jay Young is back as the big man coach. I wanted to give an anecdote in terms of Miles Johnson. People forget he was forgotten about as a recruit. He was a low 3-star recruit. I don't think he had one high major offer his senior year. He had interest his junior year. He got hurt. Jay Young saw him at a showcase or his AAU. I forget exactly where he was, and brought him to Rutgers. And I talked to a prominent Southern Cal scout who's been doing it for decades. I talked to him multiple times throughout Miles Johnson's career. And he told me initially he did not think Miles Johnson was a Power 5 player, a high major player. He didn't think it. He didn't think he was good enough. He didn't think he had that killer instinct. Now, what he did say was he had the best hands he's ever seen, and we saw that as Rutgers fans. But Jay Young helped develop Miles Johnson, and credit to Miles Johnson because he should have won Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year his last season. He developed leaps and bounds. And I still go back to, the disappointment of losing to Houston in the round of 32. If Miles Johnson doesn't get hurt at the end of the Clemson game, the game before, I don't think Rutgers loses that game. But that's a story for another day. My point is, Jay Young throughout his career, Jameel Werney at Stony Brook, Supreme Cook at Hartford, now at Oregon. He has a history of developing big men. So if there's any, I just thought when they brought him back, it was a no-brainer. And it gave me confidence that Rutgers is going to succeed at the 5 this year. It's going to be a bit of a puzzle. It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be some misses there in terms of certain games. You know, what does that total production look like? The thing is, you don't need to rely on these guys to score. You need them to be efficient in scoring. So when the opportunities present themselves, offensive rebounds, dump-offs, that they finish. In terms of, you know, can they get 6 to, and I'm kind of not counting Martini in this, but if they play 25 to 30 minutes between Ogbole and Sommerville, can they get 6 to 8 points? Can they get 10 rebounds? Remains to be seen. And those are kind of arbitrary numbers thrown out there. It's really more about efficiency. It's about ability to defend without fouling. It's their ability to be efficient rebounders, specifically in the defensive end. And to be able to space the floor a little bit. And that's not going to come naturally to Ogbole, but he is going to be able to run in transition. The team's going to run in transition. Sommerville, can he do that? And then Martini is really the X factor, because the more he plays at the 5, the more flexibility Pikiell has with the rest of the lineup. Playing ace at the 4, right? Then you do go 3 guard with Harper, Williams, and Acuff, or Durkak, or Davis. You know, PJ Hayes. Do you go Martini and Hayes in the same lineup with Ace, Dylan, and probably Jeremiah? I mean, that to me is the intriguing offensive lineup I want to see. But there's a lot of different ways you could go. And I've harped on this before, you know, in terms of Pikiell, his decision-making, his pushing the right buttons, situational substitutions, you know, keeping this team together, having them gel on the court, but also from a minutes cohesion standpoint. I think guys are going to play different minutes, different games. It's going to be a real challenge. But in a way, having the 5 as kind of undetermined, right? And you're going to have to mix and match, and you're going to have to find answers somehow. But that's going to be really intriguing in terms of how they match up and how they dictate lineups, how minutes are distributed. I want to do a full episode on minutes distribution projections for the entire team. But that 5 spot is going to be fascinating to watch. I just want to see if I have anything else to mention in terms of this. I just think that, you know, Pikiell mentioned in the article with Fonseca about, you know, Ace Bailey, Bryce Dortch being 6'10", having the ability to play the 5. That would be interesting. I think Ace, you know, listen, how can he develop defensively? Can he become an elite rim defender? Can he become an elite defensive rebounder? Who knows? Maybe we're talking in February and he's at the 5. It all depends. But there is options. And it's not like they struck out completely. In terms of they have talent, it's just not, you know, it's not the $1 million top transfer that everybody wanted. That probably was never realistic. And I'd much rather Rutgers surround, because the dynamic with this team that's fascinating is that you have 2 elite recruits, 2 projected lottery picks, and you surrounded them with veteran transfers that want to be at Rutgers and play with those guys and support them. And that is my biggest confidence in terms of the chemistry of this team, the dynamic of this team, that it will work, because you have guys that chose to be here. Jeremiah Williams could have left, he stayed. You have all these veteran players that want to play with Ace and Dylan and make it work. And that's why I believe it will work. And how your production comes from the 5 remains to be seen. It's a huge question mark. It will help dictate the ceiling for this team. But I'm encouraged by what I've seen. And I think there is options at this 5, and it's going to vary depending on situations, matchups, all that. But Rutgers is going to be a little bit unpredictable based on who's on the floor at the 5. And they're going to have to figure it out. You can't replace Cliff like for like, but you could be a little bit different. And offensively, it behooves them to be that way, and they will be that way. And they don't have a 5 that's going to demand the ball. And I don't mean that in a negative towards Cliff. That's the way his game dictated, right? He needed the ball in his hands. None of the 5s need the ball in their hands. Even Martini, he talked about it. If I get 3 shots a game, I get 3 shots a game. So you're going to have some versatility at that 5 spot in terms of you need production in certain areas, but offensive shots is not one of them. And you need that ball to go around for Ace, for Dylan, for J-Will, for Acuff, for Hayes, for Martini. Martini at the wing, right? Or at the corner 3. If he's able to make not only corner threes, but also when playmakers drive, if he can make baseline cuts and finish at the rim as your 5, coming in, spacing the floor, and then finishing, that's going to be an asset for Rutgers. I can see Martini being an asset in that area. It's something to watch for. I've rambled a bit. I'm excited for Rutgers basketball. I'll have more hoops soon. Whenever some new things drop, I have a whole list of preview action I'm going to do. I'm going to have some guests. And then also, of course, football. Coming off that tough loss, huge game against Wisconsin this weekend. I have multiple episodes coming up on that. Stay with us here at the Scarlet Faithful podcast. If you can subscribe, it helps me. I appreciate all the support. Hoops is here. Hoops is very soon to tip off. I know people are nervous about the 5. It's fair to be nervous. But I think there's a specific plan and there's specific options that's going to make Rutgers what this team's able to do. It's going to be changing. But I really think the versatility they have with the lineups as a whole is in part going to be dictated by how they can rotate the 5. Thanks so much for listening once again here at the Scarlet Faithful podcast.